Steve Albini, Jack Endino, and Steve Fisk are three of the producers who've worked with Nirvana. In this video, I want to show you guys clips from my interviews with them where they discuss how Kurt Cobain recorded vocals. Everything I do on this channel is 100% DIY. I'm the one putting together all the interviews and videos. Thanks for watching. One of the distinctive elements of In Utero, in my opinion, is the raspiness of Kurt's voice. Like, I mean, he screams on all the records, but I really find with Bleach and In Utero in particular, he's really letting loose. With a song like Tourette's, he's basically just screaming the whole time. Did he ever blow out his voice when he was recording that record?
I don't recall anything specific, although he basically sang the whole album in one go, and I think he paced it so that the less demanding songs would be early in the session, and then the harsher songs would be at the end. And then I do recall him coming in the next day and revisiting a couple of those songs, either redoing parts or whole chunks of songs.
The first song you guys did was Serve the Servants. Did you get any of the arrangements for the music before you started recording, or was everything just you get there and for the first time you're hearing these songs?
They had sent me Rio demo, which was a demo tape that they had made in Rio de Janeiro that had most of the songs from the session and a few loose jams. The arrangements were all pretty worked out, and Kurt had ideas about, for each song, he had little extra bits that he wanted to do, either a second guitar or a contrasting part he wanted to add that wasn't necessarily structural, but there would be like, okay, well, we get to this bit, it's going to be a second guitar that's going to take over or going to join. And there wasn't not a lot of it was extemporaneous. Almost all of it was, in one way or another, was worked out. Kurt had a notebook that had his lyrics and his song ideas in it. In that notebook, he also had articulated specific things about the guitar sound, like he wanted to swap amplifiers for certain songs. He used a Randall amplifier for some of it. He used, the bulk of it was this broken Fender quad reverb that he really liked. Serve the Servant specifically, I know that he used this broken quad reverb, and it was missing 3 of the 4 power tubes. So the output of the amplifier was, in technical terms, it was asymmetrical, meaning that there would be distortion on one half of the waveform and not on the other half. And that would be, an unusual thing, but it had a very harsh, distorted sound, but Kurt was actually quite fond of that harshness. And so that was a big part of that record, was him choosing a very specific voicing for each guitar.
Is there anything in particular about these sessions that stick out to you?
There are a couple of very specific things about Kurt's approach that were unique at the time and remain unique. He essentially sang the entire album in one sitting.
Really?
I think he came back the next day and did a few of the songs that, he may have redone a song or did a few of the songs that he didn't get to the first day. But essentially, we started the vocal tracking, and then we just pressed on that whole day, and he sang the whole album. That by itself is pretty unusual. His approach to singing was that while he was singing, he always wanted to be playing an instrument of some kind. In the beginning, he had this percussion instrument called a rain stick that he was toying with while he was doing the vocals. And it made this, brutal rattling sound that was picking up in the vocal microphones. And then when he heard the first playback, he was like, hey, can you get rid of that rain stick? And I was like, yeah, sorry, that's built in, So he ended up re-singing that song, but, and then he switched to this slightly broken acoustic guitar. He had this acoustic guitar that had a cracked top and had very old, very dead strings, and he would just strum along quietly while he was preparing to sing the song. And there are a couple of songs where you can hear this acoustic guitar sort of accompanying the quiet bits of the verse. And that wasn't a separate recording of an acoustic guitar. That was just the acoustic guitar he was carrying in his lap that he was using as a sort of a rhythmic confidence item during the singing. And so that acoustic guitar was a byproduct of his method of recording the vocals. I felt like he was being very square and very open with me during the session. Like he would tell me what he liked and what he didn't like, and I believed him, you know, and he would tell me what his aesthetic inspirations were for certain things.
When it comes specifically to Kurt's screaming, I think Bleach is the best sample of how intense his screams could be. Does it take a certain technique to be able to scream like that, or how is he going about doing that?
It's not a technique thing. It's a natural thing. You either have it or you don't. It's your voice does it, your throat does it, or it doesn't. I mean, yeah, it's a technique, but I mean, he didn't have enough practice or live experience or anything else to have anything that you would call a technique. He was just natural. He had a good scream, and I was very impressed with it right from the get-go. I thought, this guy's got a great scream. He's got a good voice. I could tell that he had an interesting ear for melody, because what melodies there were interesting melodies and didn't always follow the guitar riff. So there was a little bit of thought in it. So you could just tell that he had a natural rock scream that was really good. That was obvious right from the first chorus of If You Must, you know, as you immediately you'd go, whoa, okay, listen to his voice, you know, going up a notch here. So, yeah, I liked his singing right off the bat. And I believe I probably said so at the time because I remember Dale Crover agreeing with me about that exact thing.
I guess from a technical standpoint, when you're recording someone who's screaming, do you have to set the mic up in a different way than when they're not screaming, just in order so it doesn't boom out? Like, how do you go about that technically?
Technically, if I'm dealing with somebody who screams a lot, I shy away from condenser microphones entirely, which puts me slightly on the outside of a lot of recording technique, I guess. I favor dynamic microphones for rock screamers. It just sounds more natural to me. It's less sibilant. You don't get as much sort of spitty, sizzly artifacts. What we call sibilance isn't as prevalent. It doesn't tend to be as shrill. Condenser microphones, which are generally higher fidelity, tend to be not very flattering to a lot of singers who are screamy. They can make them sound very shrill and unpleasant. Strangely enough, if you give somebody a Beta 58 or a Sennheiser 421 or just a Shure SM58 or something like that, maybe put a foam thing over it so they can eat the mic, as we say, which gives them more of a feeling just like they're on stage because they're singing like this instead of into a mic that's far away. Mm-hmm. You get the proximity effect of the microphone working in your favor, but the pop filter that's over the mic is keeping the plosives from happening. Long story short, you can set up, and I've done this many times, I'll set up like 4 or 5 microphones just in a row and I'll say, okay, sing me a couple of lines of the loudest part of the song, and we'll just go through and we'll just A-B them, and we'll pick the mic. And generally with screamy singers, it's going to be a dynamic microphone. And all the expensive condensers are going to be left behind. Now, that's just my experience. Your mileage may vary. Mm-hmm. But in Kurt's case, in 1988, most likely I just had him singing into an SM58 with a pop filter. And I might have even let him hold it in his hand. I don't think so, though, because he would not have been a hand holder. He was used to playing with a guitar, so he would never have sung into the mic with it holding in his hand. I have other people do that. Mark Lanigan sang into an SM58 holding it in his hand for the Winding Sheet record. Sometimes the simple, obvious microphone is actually the best microphone to use, even though you may want to use the $5,000 microphone. It's not always the best choice. It really depends on the voice and the technique that's involved.
One of the things that, just like in like online Nirvana communities, that there's a lot of debate about is how seriously did Kurt take lyrics? Because Kurt sometimes would say publicly he didn't really prepare lyrics, he didn't really care, but then some people say no, he was very diligent with writing lyrics. In your experience, did he care a lot about the lyrics for his songs?
I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that during the Bleach sessions, there were a few songs that he literally had to stop and finish the lyrics for, like right then and there. Or maybe he had like some lines floating around in his head, but until it was time to actually do the real vocals, he hadn't crystallized it to be like, this is what the lines are going to be. And he would have to sit down for a minute and think, okay, what's the verse really going to be? I've been singing this nonsense, but now I've got these lines in my head. Let's figure it out. So he did actually finalize some of the lyrics right in front of me when we were doing the Bleach session. And I think he did that a little bit on the Dale demo as well, but I think it was more a case of just remembering what the lyrics were that he already knew. I do know that when we were doing Rape Me for the In Utero demos, he did have to sit down, and he was actually trying some lines out while I was in the studio there, and he was running them by Courtney. He was going, what do you think? Should I use this line or that line? And she'd be like, yeah, that line. No, use this line. And she'd be like, yeah, you're right. That's a better line. So he was like, he was open to opinions, but he had the lines. He always had to sit down and go, am I going to sing it this way or am I going to sing it this way? Because there'd always be a few optional phrasings in his head,
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's fairly obvious from reading the lyrics that he spent more time on the lyrics to In Utero than he did on some of the other lyrics, because I think the lyrics just show that there's more thought in them at that point. Maybe because he was more self-conscious, which I think is very likely, because he was very self-conscious after Nevermind was a success.
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about how he wrote the lyrics for Nevermind because I wasn't really present for that. But it did seem a little more casual during the Bleach and the Dale demo sessions. I think he had the lyrics written out, but, I don't think he was particularly self-conscious about it, and maybe not even that ambitious about it. I am impressed that he was able to write a song like School that has 3 lines in it. And it's a brilliant song with, only 3 lines in that song.
Yeah.
That is some economical songwriting right there that is a lesson for people, that you can tell a whole story with very few words.
Yeah, I actually agree with you 100%.
The last few years, having gotten to speak with Jack Endino and Steve Albini and people who've actually worked with the band, it kind of corrects a lot of the false images that there are of the band out there. Like, there's this kind of image that, like, sometimes Kurt is portrayed as a bit of a slacker, someone who didn't really care too much. But speaking with Steve and with Jack, they both said that he was very serious in the studio. So you had the same experience with him, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did he approach recording vocals? Was there anything unique about his approach?
No, he just did it. I mean, he just stood in front of the microphone. It was a very good microphone. Neumann U67, same one we used for Beat Happening and anybody else that recorded there. And he just sounded great. He just was a natural born singer. Just did that. A lot of people don't understand. There were so many good singers of that generation. Like, within 5 years, I recorded Sean Smith, Reggie Watts, Chris Cornell, Calvin Johnson, Kurt Cobain, Mark Lanigan, and a lot of other great singers that no one knows about, or, other people know about. So the idea that you just, this is taking care of itself, but put Kurt in front of a Neumann mic, put it through this compressor, and we're in business. It just sounded perfect.
So cool.
And it just happened organically and happened in 1 or 2 takes, So.
That's awesome. And was he easy to work with in the studio?
Yes.
That's cool. So
we had fun. It was a good time.
Okay, so they come to the studio, you start working with them. When did you first, was it right away you saw, okay, these guys are like he's a natural born singer, or did it take a few takes for that to come through?
Oh, I knew that from the Bleach record. It just sounded great. He had they call it a vocal fry. He had a place where his voice went into overtones, and I picked up all these harmonics, and it's just a classic thing that great rock singers have. And you could hear that all over the stuff. And then, believe me, I heard Bleach without ever. I don't think I ever put the record on in my house. I heard Bleach so many fucking times. By the time I recorded Nirvana, because it got played on the radio or it got played in restaurants and all this. And, but yeah, there's a whole thing when a band's getting ready to track. And especially a guy like me, because I came to engineering later on than some people. So I work hard, maybe harder than some folks, because I'm really trying to, not fuck up and do the best gig I can. But yeah, when you've got 3 people playing and, 12, 20 mics all happening, you're running around checking this and that and checking levels, and you've got a tape machine, and there's all these things that can go wrong or overmodulate or, what have you. And then you get, vocal. No, that's, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like in the middle of all of this shit, you go, oh, yeah, there you go. There's the vocal, and it just sounded perfect. It was just like him out in the room with the cymbals bleeding into everything. And he was just totally delivering, on the basic, not even as an overdub, just, while the band's laying down the basic, while he's doing allegedly a scratch vocal, he's just delivering it as if he was playing live,
That's amazing. So you mentioned about a minute ago that you also work with Chris Cornell. Was his approach to recording vocals different than Kurt's? Like, how would you compare the two of them as singers in the studio?
You have to understand, both these guys, I worked on records that were Econo records, and there wasn't any time for screwing around. And so both these guys just went in and did their part and didn't fuck around. And later, Cornell figured out all these ways to record and recorded himself a lot and chased everybody out of the room. I wasn't around for any of that. The early 90s to a certain extent, and then the 80s, definitely, they don't fit well onto the internet. And so it's not very well documented. And there are just a lot of stories and a lot of things that happened when, people had VHS cameras, but they didn't have their phone,
Yeah.
So, only so many things got recorded. Only so many people did interviews. Only, when I was recording the Screaming Trees on an Atari MX 5050B, Jack Endino was recording Nirvana and Soundgarden on an Atari MX 5050B. Dinosaur Jr. back in Boston was being recorded on an Atari MX 5050B. Down in LA, Whisker Du being recorded on an MX 5050B. So everyone was using the same half-inch 8-track. Certain things were like, okay, that's a 1985 sound. That's a 1984 sound, and you can hear it. It's all over the records.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really understand that. People are excited about tape. People want to know about all of this, but it's an odd one. So anyway, thank you for your efforts in, looking into, the past and some of the early days and all of this.
No problem. I appreciate that. I really like the old stories of how things got to where they were. Like I love history. So I feel like with Nirvana, because they're such a big band and like people just look at them, they look at them just as stars, but they don't look at the early part of how they got there. So I love uncovering these little stories about what things actually were like.